Chances are, in the 1820s, none of the settlers in the tiny frontier outpost of standing Peachtree considered it to be the future site of a thriving town. But the year 1837 witnessed a different stake in the settlement's future, literally, when civil engineer Stephen Long drove a stake in the ground to mark the terminus of the Western and Atlantic Railroad. That spot also marked the center of a settlement called Terminus, which extended in a 1-mile radius from the stake. 5 years later, it was moved near the old Georgia Railroad freight depot. So, in 1842, this zero-mile post, as it was called, marked its place in history as the oldest man-made landmark in Atlanta. Within a decade, the railroad village became a transportation hub where 3 lines met, and by 1857, it was being called the Gate City because of its importance as a rail center. I'm Lewis Grizzard, and one of my favorite topics of conversation happens to be railroads, especially old ones, steam locomotives like old 750 here, which made its maiden run in 1910. Now it's part of the new Georgia Railroad, the passenger train operated by the Georgia Building Authority since 1985. Atlanta was born a railroad town, so for me, nothing could be a more fitting symbol of the importance of preserving its unique heritage than the new Georgia Railroad. With the help of the Atlanta chapter of the National Railway Historical Society and the Georgia Building Authority, the railroad gives us a chance to relive the glorious days when locomotives like this one moved the city into a new era of prosperity. Come on aboard. I'll tell you a story or two as old 750 promises a special look at a few of the things that make Atlanta special to all of us. As we pull out of the station, you can see the Georgia Railroad Freight Depot, completed in April of 1869, making it one of the oldest buildings in downtown Atlanta. The depot and the area surrounding it was used in the filming of the movie Gone with the Wind. The Georgia Building Authority purchased the depot in 1981 and renovated it for public use. Behind the arched brick wall, there's the famous Oakland Cemetery, opened in 1850 as a combined park and burial ground. Oakland has probably the finest concentration of Victorian monumental art you'll see anywhere, and also a concentration of some of Atlanta's most illustrious citizens, such as author Margaret Mitchell and golfer Bobby Jones. 3 players in the infamous Andrews Railroad raid are also buried here.
Why don't you tell them that story, Lewis?
I think I will. Well, back in 1862, when things weren't going too well for the South, James Andrews led a raiding party of federal spies on the W&A Railroad. He was hoping to sever the supply artery between Atlanta and Chattanooga. Andrews and his men stole the train pulled by the locomotive general when everyone disembarked for breakfast at Big Shanty. When they realized the train was pulling out considerably ahead of schedule, conductor William A. Fuller, engineer Jeff Keane, and foreman Anthony Murphy took out on foot after the thieves, thinking they were Confederate deserters staging a dramatic getaway. 2 miles up the line, they learned differently when they discovered the telegraph wires had been cut. The pursuit continued at this point by pushcart as Andrews bluffed his way past each station by claiming he was rushing powder through to Beauregard at Corinth. Fuller, Murphy, and Kane finally commandeered the locomotive Yonah, which bogged down in the congestion of the freight yard, and also the William R. Smith, which came to a dead stop by the removal of 2 rails by the raiders. Not to be undone, Fuller and Murphy took to their feet again and ran 2 miles. By this time, the thin and consumptive Kane had fallen out of the pursuit. They then managed to flag down a southbound freight pulled by the locomotive Texas. It ran full steam backwards to close in on the General, which ran out of wood, water, and steam and sent the raiders scurrying into the neighboring woods. Andrews and his fellow spies were caught and hanged. Eventually, their dauntless pursuers, Fuller, Kane, and Murphy, having secured their places in Atlanta's colorful war history, were buried here at Oakland alongside 2,500 Confederate soldiers. The Texas has been renovated and is on display at the Cyclorama at Grant Park, and the General can be seen at the Big Shanty Museum in Kennesaw. One thing that makes Atlanta a great city to live in is the variety of neighborhoods to be found here. Historic sites and buildings can be found in nearly every section of the city, giving Atlantans a special and personal interest in their welfare. There's the old Edgewood Avenue Public School in the Reynoldsville section of Atlanta, where Coca-Cola President Robert W. Woodruff received his grammar school education. And up ahead here in Inman Park is one of Atlanta's old streetcar barns restored by the city for public use. It was built back in 1889 by Mr. Joel Hurt to support the Atlanta and Edgewood Avenue Street Railway, which ran from Inman Park to the Hurt Building downtown. Water, the old Candler Estate, where the presidency of Emory University resides. And here's the old Emory Train Depot. It was built in 1917 and served Atlanta passengers on the Seaboard Line until 1969. Now it serves locals and Emory students as a restaurant. Value Hill's in North Atlanta, where the Battle of Peachtree Creek was fought in 1864. During the war between the states, converging railroads made Atlanta a key supply center with no counterpart in any rebel state. No wonder Ulysses S. Grant and William T. Sherman set out to capture it at any cost. Pounded for weeks by federal artillery here at Peachtree Creek, Atlanta was surrendered on September 2nd, 1864 by Mayor James Calhoun. All was swept away. The population was scattered to the four winds, and the industrial and business section of the city lay in fire-blackened ruins. The seeds from which Atlanta had grown, its railroads, had been subjected to the most thorough plan of destruction ever visited on a transportation system. But the city was not destined to lie buried for long under its ashes. Most of Atlanta's permanent population returned, and along with newly acquired post-war citizens, they created a new city upon the ashes of the old. Less than 1 decade after being essentially demolished, Atlanta had rebuilt and had replaced Milledgeville as capital of the state. Business and professional leaders, many of them born and reared in the North, guided and plotted for more and better colleges, newspapers, hotels, and parks. The city continued to grow, and in 1925, the far-sighted future mayor of Atlanta, William B. Hartsfield, helped persuade the city to lease the Candler Family Racetrack for a municipal airport. It seemed Atlanta's fate as a transportation hub through the 20th century and beyond was sealed.